You're listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Hosted by Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, and Tom Eston, penetration tester and ethical hacker. And sponsored by Security Perspectives, your source for tailored security awareness training and assessment solutions. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you.
Episode 67, the security challenges of updating pacemakers and door locks remotely.
Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast, episode 67 for September 6th, 2017. I'm Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, and this handsome gentleman over here is Tom Eston. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing good, Scott. It's great to see you.
Yes, you're looking marvelous today.
Since we're always in person, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, in case people are wondering, we're just practicing to see if we have the audio skills to do a video podcast. So
That's right.
not that we ever will, but just curious.
Hey, that could be the next evolution of the podcast. You never know.
It could be if we could afford the bandwidth to make it sound decent.
Yeah.
You know, we're not like Leo, right? $2 million a
Right.
year worth of financing.
With all of our sponsors. Yes, exactly.
Hint, hint.
Right.
Oh, well. Anyways, now that we've taken care of that, how about we do some proper introductions? Because we haven't really done that in a few months, and people might have forgotten what we do in our day jobs.
Sure. That sounds good. I'm Tom Eston. My day job is that I'm the manager of penetration testing at a company called Veracode, which was recently acquired by CA Technologies. So I manage a remote team of ethical hackers that break into websites, find vulnerabilities in customers' applications. And while I'm not doing that, I'm a privacy advocate and frequent speaker on the topics of cybersecurity and privacy.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and myself, I'm Scott Wright here in Ottawa, Canada. By day, I do a lot of coaching and consulting on security, a lot of security awareness training and assessment. I do phishing assessments, and I design customized security awareness training programs like computer-based training and getting a little more into games now, security education and via games. So
Nice.
it's going to be some fun things to talk about in the next few months, hopefully.
Gamification.
Game-based learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually very actively looking for places to speak now in front of people because I guess that's the thing to do when you're a consultant. I find it's a really good way to get in touch with people, network, and learn more about what people are experiencing, what they're in need of. So I'm always open to talking about going to some place to speak at a chapter meeting or professional development days or conferences. So lots of fun. So our agenda today is a nice collection of items. We're going to talk about the 711 million email addresses exposed by a SpamBot server.
That's the largest collection I think ever found of email addresses in one location.
So this is just email addresses, nothing extremely sensitive on its own, but potentially.
Well, email addresses and credentials for mail servers so that the spammers can send messages so they look like legitimate messages.
Okay. Well, that'll be interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
And then it's a recurrence of a vulnerability we sort of heard wind of last year around pacemakers that, sadly, once you've installed them, it may be hard to update. The thing that keeps your heart going.
Yeah, kind of important.
Yeah, it might be. So
just a little bit.
Touch on that. And what else have we learned about apps that track us? You're always on top of that stuff.
Nothing has changed ever.
They still do.
Yeah. They still do, and we have two recent examples again of popular applications that are sharing your location and sharing your contact information without your knowledge, or they're doing some shady things to get around some of the controls that Apple and Android put in place for your privacy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And actually, going back to the issue of updating and lack thereof,
I love this.
What happens when your smart lock loses its mind?
Yeah. What happens when your smart lock that you just purchased locks you out of your house and you can't get back in because of a failed firmware update? So we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, somebody's trying to take over the world, and they're doing a good job locking us out of our houses. And then I found this little thing I'm going to call the amazing tip of the month, and it's not that amazing, but it may be useful if you find certain things annoying, as I do, like getting notices in Facebook that Fred has become friends with Beverly or something, and you probably don't know at least one of them. Hopefully you know the other, but it's still kind of annoying to just get a whole steady stream of who's update or who's friends with whom. And we'll talk about how you might be able to maybe make other people's lives a little bit nicer in this area.
Nice.
So, all right. So let's jump into our first story about the SpamBot server.
Yeah, so there was a researcher, I think it was a French security researcher, discovered this giant database that was just completely open and accessible on a server somewhere that had 711 million unique email addresses that is used for spam. This was actually picked up by Troy Hunt. I'm not sure if we talked about Troy on a previous podcast.
I think we've talked about him occasionally. Yeah, he does some really good research.
Yeah, really good research, and he owns a service called Have I Been Owned, or Pwned for you hacker types, which it's a service that you can sign up for, and whenever there's a big data breach, he takes the databases that have been exposed and he puts them into his service, and it will actually send out an email notification to you letting you know that your email showed up, or your username, or whatever you configure it with showed up in one of these breaches, so you can take action if maybe you need to change a password for a service or something like that. And in fact, I ended up getting 2 notifications from Troy Hunt's service when this announcement came out. Some old email addresses that I haven't used in years, right, shown up on here. But regardless, this is one of those things that apparently how it was used is as a spammer, whoever's using this database, would take all those email addresses, and then there was another dump of their SMTP servers, which are used to send mail from, and associated credentials. So what that did was, if you are able to use those credentials, you're essentially allowed to send email as whatever compromised mail service that was, making it look like a legit email. Mm-hmm. So if you were getting tons of spam from a certain maybe a company or an individual, that may have ceased since this information was compromised. Not really sure, but it's probably the biggest find of its type in terms of email addresses.
So those addresses were just used as targets for spam, or was it were they used as the originating accounts?
They were used for spam and for malware distribution. They had reports that they were used for banking Trojans, so sending those out.
So they were all sent to those 700 million addresses, yes, basically. Oh, okay.
Correct. Yeah, and leveraged, right? So some of these emails were collected from previous data breaches, so similar to the Troy Hunt's, legitimate service. It's just whenever these breaches come out, attackers just take that new list and then pop it into their database, and now they have a fresh new list of email addresses. And so it kind of goes to show how a lot of this information is just shared amongst a underground black hat community, right? That
Yeah,
is using this information for bad things.
yeah. I mean, I sort of assume that any email addresses that are exposed on the internet, on a website, if you want to email me at this address. Those
Yep.
get picked up by
Sure.
bots or indexers all the time, but didn't realize that the whole process of breach disclosures, when or not so much disclosures, but when the hackers do the doxing, right, of all these
Right.
dropping all the email addresses and credentials for people at all these services that do spam would definitely like to get their hands on all those email addresses just as another set of targets. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and that's something we'll put in the show notes of, Troy Hunt's service. I definitely recommend people signing up for that. And it's good to get notified when your email address is compromised, and then they will actually tell you the service that had the breach. Right. So then you can take action, and hopefully you're using unique passwords for all of your different accounts out there. But if you're not, then you can maybe fix that.
Yep. Cool. And on a similar vein, well, do we want to go to which one do we want to go to next? There's the...
Could talk about the pacemaker, right?
Sure, yeah, let's talk about the pacemaker. So there was this, I think, a news article probably a year ago regarding the pacemakers that were made by, I think it was, I don't know if they were made by or installed by St. Jude Medical from California. But they did find some potential vulnerabilities in there. It was reported. They sort of had a, stock statement about, well, we take security and privacy very carefully or very seriously, and it sort of went away. But we never heard the story of whether anything was fixed or not. But now recently, there's a new story saying 465,000 patients were told to visit their doctor to patch their critical pacemaker vulnerability. So you can imagine how that went.
Yeah, that is kind of serious. But I can understand, when there are vulnerabilities in such a critical device like that, they probably don't want to be doing like over-the-air updates, like at home, kind of like how your phone can be updated from anywhere. You don't have to take your phone into like the Apple store, right, to get a firmware update. Yeah. But with something that's inside your body, you're probably going to want a little more hands-on. Well, just saying.
Yeah, so I mean, the whole original vulnerability was the fact that it could be potentially accessed remotely over the air, right? Through radio transmission, and so I think that's what it is. So theoretically, I guess if you can manipulate it that way, then they must be able to somehow update the things,
sure,
wirelessly as well. So, I mean, good luck to them with that, but it's going to be a large job. And it's one of those things you have to think about when you're designing a product, right? Especially one that's going to get embedded in a body. How do you make it easy and secure to update the software in these things?
Yeah. And it's interesting as I looked at this article too, and then, the risk, right? The vulnerability is you have to be within 50 feet of the patient that has the device. There's some caveats actually pulling off an attack like that. And of course, TV shows and things, over dramatize kind of the risk of, implanted devices that control your heart and heart rate, things like that. Being hacked and compromised. I mean, certainly they can, but, I don't think we're at the point yet where it's a extreme concern, where, people's lives are really in danger. Maybe one day, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, it's funny because the article that we linked to here has a few tweets quoted from Matt Green. And there's some, he says it's all theoretical, but right. You could sit in an intensive care unit and basically access a lot of people's devices in a very close area. And he says this whole nobody will hack pacemakers, the world isn't homeland, ignores the threat that extortion attacks on the manufacturers can happen, right? So there's a lot of different ways, different scenarios, threat scenarios, where you could potentially be at risk. So it's a good article.
Yeah, it is. It kind of brings up another interesting point too of what in our industry, in the cybersecurity industry, is called stunt hacking, where researchers may overblow a certain vulnerability that they discover just for fame and fortune and for
Right.
conference speaking slots and things like that. And so when you read a lot of these stories, they sometimes the researchers are a little more over dramatic about the seriousness of some of the flaws that they find. And again, do your own research. Take with that information, with a grain of salt sometimes, because it may not be as serious as it is. So just something to keep in mind sometimes when you read these things from
Yeah,
these security researchers.
absolutely true. Still, if I was getting a pacemaker or something embedded, I would kind of check into the security of it.
And you should do your research.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's just like a Google search of the device and seeing what you find.
Yeah, you're gonna hope that they have pretty strong, authentication of whoever it is that's trying to update your device.
Right.
Good. All right. Well, now that we've taken care of that,
Mm-hmm.
what else is going on in our
Oh, let's talk about
crazy world?
mobile applications again. So, two here in the news recently. The popular weather app AccuWeather has an issue, or had an issue, where it would share your location regardless if you opted out of kind of the prompt of, we need to access your location wherever you are, even when you're not using the app, as well as some other personal information. So they were still allowing, even if you opted out and said no, that information was, I'd say it wasn't your geolocation information, so latitude, longitude from your GPS on your device, but it was your Wi-Fi network and your MAC address of your wireless access points.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been research that has shown that just with that information, you can pinpoint locations on a map, because there are people that drive around with mapping software. It's called war driving, where they pick up people's wireless access points at their home. And then what they do is they plot that on a map. And guess what you have now? You have a map of everybody's wireless access points. And so companies buy this information, and then they use that to triangulate people's locations. So if you ever browse the web and you see advertising that pops up for, hey, local singles in your area, and you're like, wow, that's my hometown, that's like where I'm at, that's part of that, right?
Yeah.
That's part of that information that these advertisers purchase. And companies like AccuWeather and others sell that information to these third-party brokers, and sometimes that's done without your knowledge.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting just to see how, I don't know if you would call it malicious, but at least immature in terms of being able to manage personal information and responsibly, right? So
it is
the general approach for managing information, where you may be able to personally identify somebody, at least down to whether it's a geographical area or related to other devices or entities that you know of, then you've always got to be concerned with the data collection process. I'm working sometimes with organizations that are very concerned about the multiple steps of managing privacy, which aren't just about confidentiality, right? It's about making sure that the people whose information is being collected know that it's being collected. They know why it's being collected. They know what it's going to be used for, how it's going to be protected. So there's a lot more to privacy in general, from a legal point of view, especially, than just protecting confidentiality. And a lot of these organizations and companies that are, trying to leverage this information don't really seem to get that.
Right. Yeah, and it was, in the show notes we'll link the article to this, but it was interesting how they were talking about, if you're a company and your app has this specific type of functionality that may cause privacy issues, you probably should know your app does that. So this was, AccuWeather's excuse was, well, we didn't know that this was happening, was the blanket response. And nowadays that's a pretty poor response for a company that has millions of people installing their app. So
yeah, I mean it's maybe an innocent mistake, especially if you're licensing tools or APIs or code from third parties that they do stuff that you maybe didn't know about, but it's your responsibility as the person or company providing the service or product to understand what the underlying technology actually does.
Right. Yep. And in a similar note, there's an application this app called Soraya. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's an app.
I thought it was called Saraha.
Soraya. I'm not really sure. So these names are getting more challenging to pronounce. But the issue with this one, and I think we could probably have a whole podcast just on this app, but this is an app that lets people sign up and receive anonymous messages from your friends, basically positive and negative messages just anonymously, to either encourage you or to call something out about you that maybe you weren't aware of.
Ooh, I want this app. I want to use this app.
I don't know. This is opening up Pandora's box, I think, with your friends. But yeah, so there's all kinds of. We could go down many roads just talking about that app.
Really, wow.
Cyberbullying, and I'm just thinking of kids using this could be just disastrous. But anyway, there's an issue with that app where it was uploading your address book and contact list on your phone without your knowledge on Android or certain versions of Android. Apparently that's been fixed with newer versions of Android. But the issue with Android, as we've talked about in the podcast before, is many people, first of all, don't update their Android devices to newer versions of the operating system, which has better security and privacy features. But there's something known in the industry called device fragmentation on the Android front, where device manufacturers just stop supporting these devices after so many years, and these devices are kind of left to never update. And so when these things are fixed by developers, unfortunately, a lot of these things these devices are still out there and will still continue to have this issue until they just get a new device. On the Apple iOS side, apparently there is a prompt that says, do you want to upload your address book? And of course, most people just hit yes, because if you don't, then most likely the app just shuts down.
Yeah, but they you know what? They're sneakier than that. They don't ask, do you want to upload your address book? Do you want to see which of our contacts are on, or which of your contacts are on Snapchat or on whatever,
Yep.
So it's more compelling a question.
They make it compelling.
But but the result is, do you want to upload all your contacts? So yeah, you got to be thinking about that. Interesting.
Right. Yeah. It is. So again, it gets back to your point, Scott, about, transparent privacy policies. What is our application doing? How do you opt out? It's all over the board with, what companies do with this. I'm actually going to be doing some research for a talk that my friend Kevin Johnson and I are going to be doing at InfoSec World next year on privacy policies across many of the popular applications that we all use. And we're going to be taking kind of a closer look at, what do they actually say? How easy is it for consumers to understand what they are installing, and some of the options that people are given to opt out of these things. So I think it'll be an interesting look at just how we use these applications and those privacy ramifications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's already been some work in that area, but I think it needs a lot more, right? Looking at how effective, or how easy to understand, the whole privacy policies are in certain solutions, and how you can make them more understandable and meaningful to people. And then there's the question of, okay, so they say this is what they do today. What if they change their policy tomorrow, right?
Right.
How do you get updated on that?
And how do users know? I mean, some companies notify you and others don't, and there's no real great even regulations on that from a government standpoint.
And just as a privacy note, in Canada, that we've had an update to our private sector privacy law called PIPEDA
Oh.
And so it's actually stronger now in terms of requiring data breach notifications, which didn't before. But the problem that we currently have is there's no regulations that say how you're supposed to do some of these things. Like they're pretty high level requirements.
Right.
So we're still waiting for that. It should be soon though. So we'll do an update on that when we hear more.
Oh, Canada.
Yes. Go Blue Jays or whatever. All right. So, okay. So we did our discussion of AccuWeather and we did Saraha or whatever you want to call it. The app. And so
Smart locks.
Smart locks. Yeah. Well, who doesn't want a smart lock?
Or unsmart locks, as I'd call it. Yeah, this is interesting and potentially pretty serious. There are these, as everyone's probably aware, you can buy locks that are internet controlled. I don't know. It is kind of scary to think that your internet enabled lock can unlock your phone. What could possibly go wrong? But this manufacturer named LockState sells these locks. In fact, they partner with Airbnb to install these on maybe your rental properties, or because they make it easy for, someone to gain access that you want them to gain access to
using
your property.
Their smartphone, right?
Exactly, through the app, and then they give them permission, and very convenient, right? Well, the company had an issue where they accidentally pushed out a firmware update for a different product. I guess the version 7 of the product, when this is like version 6 or something like that, and it bricked every single lock. So it basically shut down all these locks, making them completely inoperable. It's a pretty big issue. Of course, when this happens, they had a customer service nightmare, through Twitter and through phone calls. And unfortunately, the only way they offered to remediate the issue is either send, the lock back. You'll get it, within 5 to 7 days. They'll update it, or you get a completely new replacement lock, which can. So you send the back portion, I guess that has the CPU and the computer pieces, or you just get a full new replacement, which could take 14 to 18 days.
Wow.
So unfortunately, you'd have to resort back to using the traditional key method to get in your house.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's interesting.
But obviously a lot of upset people, and this is again an issue that what goes wrong when a firmware update is pushed out incorrectly.
Yeah.
Companies need to think about, and I applaud them for updating, right? And and
they had it half right,
fixing things. But the implementation didn't go so well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not just all these end users or customers of the locks, right? It looks like in this story, Airbnb actually has a partnership with this company. So Airbnb's business, as well as their clients who are in business, right, trying to earn money from renting out their properties, all of those businesses are affected in terms of their revenues, their customer service costs, and things like that. So it's not just a bunch of end users who couldn't get in their house. Big deal, right?
Yeah. I like some of the comments of, this isn't something minor. This is a full brick. What if you don't carry the key? What if your kids don't and you're at work?
Yeah.
Suddenly being unable to operate your lock is a big deal. And I would agree. You're then now breaking into your own house. Not fun.
No, I know. It reminds me, actually, it's funny because they have the picture of the smartphone by the lock and, imagining it being unable to unlock your door or not being able to unlock your door. But there was a picture on Twitter that I saw just in the last day or so of somebody who got locked into their house because a UPS guy left a parcel under the doorknob, and it was the same kind of doorknob as is shown in this article, right, where it's a horizontal latch, and the parcel just happened to be tall enough that it sort of wedged underneath the door, and the guy couldn't actually get out of his house because he couldn't turn the doorknob with the parcel in the way.
Unbelievable.
Those are the risks that we face in today's internet, right?
That is right. The new age.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's, it'll all get fixed eventually, right? But until then.
We think.
Yeah. So my one last note was what I call my amazing tip of the month, although we don't do them every month. It just happens to be this month. I discovered over the last week or so. I don't know why I just noticed this. Maybe it has become a bigger trend, or maybe Facebook actually changed something in how they notify people. But all of a sudden, a bunch of my friends, different people, I would get notifications that they are now friends with somebody else. And a lot of cases, I don't really care about that. So I really would love to have been able to go to a setting and say, turn off all these notifications of my friends who have made friends with people. And I can almost imagine Facebook planning this, right? Saying, we really need to notify people that their friends are making friends with other people, so you can, you can get more curious and learn about more people, make more relationships, add more value for our advertisers. I don't know if that really happened or not, but it just sort of seems over the last week or so a really strong trend of these notifications. And so I decided to try and figure out if there's a way to turn it off. And when I did a search, I discovered a post actually on the Facebook help community of somebody who had this same problem 2 years ago. How do I, hide, the recently added friends from my timeline? And it turns out there is apparently still no way to do this, to turn it off on the receiving end. But what you can do to make yourself a little more friendly to your friends is turn off the notifications that come from you to other people when you make friends with somebody. So there is a way to do that. And so I put a link in our show notes for that. But basically, there's a setting in your activity. If you go to your own profile, you go to your activity log, I think it's called. And once you're in there, there's options down the left side. Of course, they hide most of them, so you have to click more to get to the actual information about friends. And when you go there, and there's a tiny little box up in the corner, you click. They hide this stuff so well. But there's an option called New Friend Reports. And if you, it's checked by default. If you uncheck it, apparently that turns off notifications from you to your friends whenever you make a new friend. So I just thought that was a useful thing to know about, even though it's not exactly what I was looking for. I think it's still a useful thing. And if we all did it, then
that's right.
I wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah. You can also do the same thing with your relationship status too.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah.
For some people is a big deal. You don't want all your friends knowing if you've recently broken up with your girlfriend or what have you. So yeah, but it's almost like Facebook doesn't want you to find those settings. Isn't that interesting?
How dare you insinuate such a thing?
You mean they make money off of your information? No way.
Yeah, well, it's funny what people believe. They're the customer here. Well, no, they're the product.
You are the product. That's right.
Have you seen that cartoon? I might have mentioned this before, right? There's the cartoon of the pigs eating out of the trough. And the one pig says to the other, and all the food's free.
That's a good one. Yeah. I like that.
Anyway, okay. Well, I think that wraps up our serious content for the day.
Yeah.
But any questions from the gallery?
I have no questions.
No questions. Okay. No, I don't see anybody raising their hands. But if you do have a question, though, you can always email us at feedback@sharedsecurity.net.
Yep.
Or you can call us at 613-693-0997, which is our permanent voicemail number. We'll never answer it, by the way, but you can leave a message. And we will mention you if it's appropriate.
And,
if you leave something
while you're
mentionable.
Yeah, and while you're changing your privacy settings in Facebook, you can find us on Facebook as well, where we post news articles and our thoughts and comments on the world events around cybersecurity and privacy.
And of course, we have a webpage, which is probably where people have actually found this audio, but or it could be on iTunes.
So.
But on our webpage, sharedsecurity.net, each episode by the player has a little link so you can sign up for notifications, and occasionally we send out notifications of these episodes being published, so you might get that.
Yep.
All right, so with that, I'm going to say that's it for me. Anything more to add, Tom?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, well, we want to thank everybody for listening in, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, bye-bye.